Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the DDT Method podcast. Today I get to sit down and have a conversation with Mr. Steve Kuclo. And if you follow bodybuilding in any way, shape, or form, you definitely already know who he is. If you're not the biggest bodybuilding fan in the world, you probably recognize him because he's actually very active in the health and longevity space now. And in my opinion, we were just talking off air a little bit, this is one of the perfect people to speak to regarding marrying these two communities. And in 2025, we have access to so much information on both ends, the performance enhancing side and the longevity side, that it gets a little confusing kind of bridging that gap and marrying the two together. So before we get into the specifics of that, Steve, for anybody that might not be familiar with you, what brought you to the dance? What's your background? How did you break into the industry? And what are you doing now?
Wow. Well, Drew, thanks for having me on, man. I see what you've been posting and putting out there, man, and it strung a chord with me. And I was like, dude, we definitely got to talk more. And then you invited me on here, so I appreciate that first and foremost. But like you said, man, I've been in the health and fitness space for over 20 years. I started at 18 from athletics. Athletics always drew me into like wanting to be the biggest, fastest, strongest guy in anything I did. And obviously, with bodybuilding being like the one man sport. What I loved about it was that self challenge and that really the motivation within, and it was like the tested you in a lot of different ways in like team sports. To kind of like preface how I got into bodybuilding, that would be it. And obviously, like the iron bug bit me at a young age. I was in high school playing football, and I just loved lifting weights. And I remember going to the Arnold Classics. I lived up in Michigan at the time. I would go to the Arnold Classics at like 14, 15. A group of guys from the gym would drive down. So, I mean, I've been going there for a long time. And then that eventually, got me into some of the meathead gyms in the area of Detroit where I grew up. And then there were some guys that were like, man, you need to compete. And I always thought you had to be like Ronnie Coleman to get on stage. You had to be like this absolute monster. But with bodybuilding and what the NPC offers today, really at any level, you could obviously compete. At that time, really, there was only bodybuilding. There wasn't physique and classic physique and all that kind of stuff. So it was just bodybuilding, and ended up having a lot of success at a very young age as far as like winning shows in the teenage nationals, all that kind of stuff. And then went on to turn pro at 25 at the Mr. USA in conjunction working as a full-time firefighter paramedic. So I always love the health aspect of like learning the body, the biology, the physiology, the kind of more or less the mechanics of things was always intriguing to me. That's why I kind of dual careered for so long until I can go full time with bodybuilding. So I worked as a firefighter and paramedic for over 10 years, and then I eventually retired from there to go full time into bodybuilding. So I love learning about the body, how it works, and obviously in bodybuilding it's extremes. In emergency medicine, it's extremes as well. So I've been able to really understand the body at a lot higher levels than most say studies that come out that you hear, and that's there's always that gray area or confusion with people, or they get so set like, oh, this study says, well, there's like bodybuilding's never been studied. There really isn't like the test subjects of bodybuilding, which take things to the absolute extremes with whether it's anabolics or nutrition or exercise, and are as disciplined as they are. So my understanding of it is at a very high level, I believe. So in what I'm able to do is I could understand when things are very complex, digest it, and kind of simplify it very easy. Like that's the way my brain works. I don't try to like regurgitate overly complex or complicated things with a lot of my clients. Kind of sidetracking of more or less what in essence got me into this, but obviously being a firefighter medic, competing at high levels in bodybuilding, it was till 2022, I was active as an IFBB Pro full-time competing. At the same time, like really still digging into my roots in the health and wellness space. And I was coming to kind of that crossroad where it's like, hey, I'm hitting my late 30s. You can't compete forever. I'm still really healthy. Like health has always been at the forefront of me competing. And obviously with bodybuilding, there's a lot of it's healthy and a lot of it's unhealthy. And I've talked about that before. So it's like, trying to bridge the gap, trying to create that balance there. And then for me with coming kind of not necessarily retiring, but saying, hey, I'm at this new chapter of life. I started a family with my wife. We have a beautiful, almost 2-year-old boy now. But at that time, I was like, hey, I want to go into something new. And kind of, I've always had that entrepreneur spirit, wanting to get into, have some businesses around what I do. I mean, anything could happen in bodybuilding. You can get injured, you could, tear a muscle and boom, like you can't compete. What's next? So my thing was, that's when I launched Upgraded Human Wellness. My current partner at a men's group at church. We were talking one day. I had no idea what he did. He ended up coming up to me, and he kind of was like, "Man, I think I recognize you." And he moved. He's one of the Texas transplants from up the New York area. And then when he came down, he said, we just really connected. And I said, bro, we gotta like merge what we want to do. And he's got a lot of experience in the functional medicine space and hormonal space. And then that kind of led me into getting a lot of my certifications in functional integrative health and the longevity space and all that kind of stuff. So it just kind of really exploded into what we're talking now. And it is, this space is at such an infant stage. There's a lot of information out there, some good, some bad, and it's kind of like how do people decipher between what's good? And I think at the end of the day, it's ultimately just keeping things simple is what I like to do, and that's how I've lived in a bodybuilding career. I try not to overcomplicate things. Life, I try not to overcomplicate things. So ultimately, I think that's what our main message will probably be today: is just keeping things simple.
No, and I think that's great because we live in this time where there's just so much information at our fingertips 24/7, and it's hard enough trying to decipher it, but trying to break everything down to the most complicated minutia, as important as it is to understand things, you don't necessarily want to be thinking like a supercomputer 24/7.
Right.
Now, something that I've noticed, and speaking to a great multitude of different people with different backgrounds, which this podcast has, blessed me with the ability to do, I find that it's always the type that were pushing really hard earlier in life or earlier in their careers that always kind of kept a finger on the pulse of general health, that found themselves more rewarded almost by transitioning into a phase where they can now push health maximally, push this biohacking end of it, if you want to call it that, or this longevity and wellness aspect after the career kind of changes pace and you're not going for the extremes anymore. Now it's kind of trying to become better in all regards. It almost gives us a different goal, but the same kind of target. We're still shooting for this perfection, so to speak, but now kind of like the parameters have changed a little bit. Now, what have you noticed in transitioning kind of overall goal? You went from an extreme of being the biggest, baddest, gnarliest, and not for nothing. I mean, I'll put you over if you're not going to say it yourself. I mean, you've been on the Olympia stage, on the Arnold Classic stage, placing, and don't hate me if I'm wrong, I believe 6th at the Olympia.
Yeah, 6th was my top place.
3rd at the Arnold, correct?
3rd's the best at the Arnold, Ohio. I won Arnold South America, which was a big one. In 2014, I won that one.
So yeah, we're not going to undershoot any of this. Like, you were at the highest level, like the highest level. So obviously you had to push things. I'm not saying whether or not you did things that were super dangerous, a little bit dangerous, not very dangerous, but you were very athletically inclined and driven towards that specific goal. Now, as everything's changed, what are some of the ways that your approach to things have changed? Not necessarily like your testosterone dose or anything like that, but what's your mindset when you're going to the gym? What's your mindset when you set mini goals throughout the course of the year? Is it still getting bigger and getting leaner at different times? Is it just general health? Is it mental cognition? How have your goals changed as a whole?
I think it's a combination of all those. I think it's trying to assess what I did the last 20 years and say, hey, did I injure or kind of cause any issues potentially long-term from what I did? So with my company, what we love to do is we go really in depth with a lot of lab work. We do a lot of the blood work, genetic testing, DNA age testing, all that kind of stuff. And even like, heavy metal stuff, hair tissue analysis. And a lot of the tests, we can see things that have lingered for years. Not like, oh, the last month I ate like crap and my A1C's up because my blood sugar's been up. No, like we're looking at stuff that could have been an issue for, years of potentially damaging my body. I've looked at. I was surprising, our bodies are amazingly resilient at detoxing itself, at repairing itself, at healing itself. Like that's one thing that I think is at a younger age, it plays in your favor in bodybuilding. The liver's ability to regenerate, the liver's ability to detoxify, and me understanding that more now, just kind of going through it and doing some things that we heard or what our coach were telling us at the time, but now seeing like, hey, that in like running genetic tests now and seeing like what my body's more susceptible to based on my genes. It's good to know. Like I'm really big on the cardiac side, and I love digging into like the cholesterols and understanding a lot of the inflammation markers that are involved with that, and understanding how nutrition impacts that. And I could see that, and I understand like, hey, I ate a certain way for so many years, and predominantly most of bodybuilding's diet is really healthy and good for the long term, but there is components to it that are unnecessary. Like bodybuilding is a sport of extremes. You know that you've trained with, seen, and probably coached plenty of bodybuilders, and it's do we as humans need to walk around eating 400 or 500 grams of protein a day? No, we don't need that much protein. That's what I often like kind of kibosh right out of the gate with people. Like, listen, you don't need as much protein as you think you do in order to be healthy and sustain or even gain muscle. Even the calorie side is not quite as high as what bodybuilders typically take it. There's time and place and reason why you have to go so extreme with things and push your body past what its kind of genetic potential or limits may be, and you're able to do that. Obviously, it's a combination of nutrition and training and supplementation that all kind of help push that up. But for me, it ended up being like, hey, what's done is done. Now let's really dig into how could I get as healthy as possible? How could I maintain an optimal level with things? And okay, what's optimal level? And really, I think optimal level and goal is kind of go hand in hand. Um, if you just want to be the average guy fit, like okay, maybe there's certain things that you look at, like hey, my testosterone levels, what should that be at? What kind of markers should I look at for making sure my thyroid's optimal. If I'm trying to lose fat, like all these things, I always try to make sure they're in optimal levels. I can give you an example. Really, what drew me to this was, from years of dieting and beating my body up, the kind of the yo-yo of bodybuilding, of kind of in season, off season, hypocaloric, hypercaloric, all that kind of stuff. It was my thyroid took a beating, and to a point where it became a little bit hypothyroidism I had, and I was the conventional doctor's like, oh, you got a hypothyroid, like let's go ahead and give you some T4 or a combination of T3, T4. And so I was taking that for a while, and I'm just like, why do I want to have to take this medication the rest of my life? They're like, I don't want to have to in order to function or feel good. So after that's when I met my partner, we kind of went through the labs he was doing, a very comprehensive, in-depth lab, hormonal lab, thyroid markers, all the above, and we ended up kind of weaning myself off of the thyroid medication and utilizing a lot of natural compounds like supplements, different herbs, minerals, etc., just kind of feeding my thyroid the proper nutrition, and then boom, like my thyroid's perfect functioning now. I don't depend on thyroid medication. I don't need that. So I'm like, there's a lot of value to this, and there's something to this. Like that really sparked that was like the light bulb in my head. Like this stuff really works, and it's looked down upon by the conventional medicine world, because obviously pharmaceuticals run that business. It's kind of the sicker people are, and the more medication they have to be on, the more money that big pharma's making, the more money that doctors are making by writing scripts and doing all that kind of stuff. So my thing was like, I don't want to be dependent on any medication. How do I really go on the nutrition or supplements that I can supplement my nutrition with in order to be as healthy as possible? And that really led me into getting my integrative health and holistic health certifications, and being board certified and all those. And that's kind of what again led me into what I'm doing now with the functional health, and because I wanted to be as healthy as possible. Now having a son, like in bodybuilding, you're a little bit like narrow sighted. You're like, I just want to do this. I don't care what it costs. I'll pretty much kill myself to get on stage and win that title. Like that's the mentality of most bodybuilders. But now it's like, hey, wait a second. Like there's life beyond bodybuilding. There's life beyond 40 years old. And what's that look like? Do I want to try to live my optimal, healthiest life as long as I can? Obviously be around for my son and see all his accolades and help him do the things he wants to do. And that's kind of the mindset I have. And that was the switch for me. So it's just really implementing all those things and understanding, learning my body even more so now than in bodybuilding. I think what I I say this a lot of time to my clients. If I knew what I knew now 15 years ago in bodybuilding, I feel like my body would be even better now. But it's like, okay, it's not too late. There's always time to, I tell people they're 40, 50, 60. I work with a lot of 60-year-old guys that really want to, flip the switch with their health. And we go ahead and implement a lot of the protocols and different things that we do and do the testing, and boom, like they feel like they're 40 again. They knock 20 years off. They're like, man, this is great. I was like, absolutely. It's never too late to start.
Exactly. And I really want to get into some of these protocols, not only for the older guys, but for the younger guys. Like you're saying, if you knew 15 years ago what you knew now, let's try to empower some people with some of those tips and tricks and some of those additions to their current protocols. But before we get there, I do want to touch a little bit on that concept of just switching priorities, because I always tell people that my superpower as a coach or as an educator was always my own neuroticism for my own health. So I definitely pushed the limits. I never really had the genetics to do anything at a very high level bodybuilding wise, but I knew I was coaching bodybuilders because of the opportunities that I had. So I wanted to walk the walk. So I put myself in situations and did a few shows. And I'm not going to lie, I was the guy that late 20s, early 30s, I'm like, all right, let's see what 2 grams feels like. Let's try 3 grams, and did all the dumb shit that we all do at one point or another. And I was always cognizant of, let's get the blood work done. Let's, run some citrus bergamot for the HDL, et cetera, whatever I knew to implement at the time. And I always kind of kept the thumb on the pulse a little bit. So I didn't know enough, but I knew enough to not do anything incredibly dumb while I was doing dumb things.
Yeah.
So as I got more into this end of it and learned more, I got into the testing, like you were saying. I've gotten my calcium score, my EKGs, all my scans and everything like that. And, a lot of it speaks to genetics on that end of things, but I was kind of shocked to find at 38, 39, 40, as I really got into all this testing, that I was doing great. And especially over the last couple of years, focusing more on this side of things, no damage, no left ventricular hypertrophy, a 0 on my calcium score, no hardened plaque. Everything looks great. And to the point where I'm double checking, they're calling me saying, oh, your calcium score is 0. I'm like, are you sure? And they're like, well, why are you questioning it? I'm like, don't ask me why I'm questioning it. Don't worry about it. But that always kind of makes me think a little bit, because you have this mentality with the younger guys that are saying, you know what? Like you said, I don't give a shit if it kills me. This is what I want, and I'm going to do what I need to do. If it takes 10 years off my life on the back end, so be it. And then you have a lot of guys in their 40s and 50s that just kind of accept the same thing. Hey, I pushed really hard in my 20s and 30s. I'm going to die 5 or 10 years younger than I would have otherwise, but I just have to accept it. And it's almost this like chest beating, like, yep, I did it. I'm tough as fuck, so I'm going to be proud of the consequences. My question for you, Steve, is, are these consequences necessarily there? Is it possible to still live a long, healthy, optimized life, even if we did some things in the past that are damaging? Or do we just have to accept that we've knocked a few years off no matter what?
I think there's somewhere in the middle there. I think, yeah, you might knock a few years off, that you can't kind of reverse some of the damage, but I think some of the damage can be reversed with the right protocols and doing things. Like I said earlier, our bodies are amazing at regenerating or repairing itself from, again, damage that we do. I mean, particularly the liver. You check most bodybuilders probably 2 weeks out of a show, and their liver enzymes look like they're alcoholics. I mean, that's, I had that done one time. I was a couple weeks out of a show, and my trainer at the time was like, nothing you're taking is real. It's got to be fake. And then we did labs, and I was like, it's real, because liver enzymes are through the roof and everything else is jacked up. So yeah, it's great. So just, caution, don't do labs 2 weeks out, expect them to look good for most bodybuilders. But, I never pushed to that point of saying, I want to, like some of the guys are doing right now. I could say what they're doing in the bodybuilding world, like overseas. I know a lot of those guys are kind of lab rats. The amounts of like growth hormone and IGF that's being used and other compounds, that's highly likely pulling a few years off your life. Absolutely. But, there's really no case or like directly related overdose of, say, a testosterone. Like that just doesn't happen. Now, secondary effects, yes. Okay. If you're super hypertensive, if you have, cardiac issues already, that's not going to help your case. And it's kind of like COVID. Like COVID didn't directly kill a ton of people. It was because they had a bunch of underlying issues that all of a sudden was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was like, just because you're hypertensive or you're diabetic, you have all these issues, and then you get COVID, boom, and you die. It's not like, oh, I got COVID and died, kind of thing. So
Hmm.
similar in the steroid or performance enhancing drug world, or with that, most of those guys if you run a high dose, is it going to kill you? Not necessarily, but you have to watch certain things. You have to watch your H&H, your hemoglobin, hematocrit. You got to, because that's a very common thing that just goes sky high. People ignore. It's beating the crap out of your kidneys, beating the crap out of with blood pressure in your heart, and again, that could lead to things like stroke or a lot of the hypertensive issues that can happen with having high blood pressure. So again, it's understanding if you're going to do something, there's going to be a consequence. And with anything in life, you look at it, if I do something, if I drive really fast, I potentially can get in a car accident or kill somebody. If I drive drunk, like, there's things that you're going to have consequences to your actions. So it's just understanding that, maybe working with somebody that's knowledgeable that can help you, guide you through that. And, even in most conventional or most doctors that are out there don't understand this because it's not taught in their textbook. Things like nutrition, peptides, regenerative medicine, that kind of stuff is like on the forefront of learning by trial and error, by clinical data that's coming out from people doing it, actually applying it, saying, hey, this actually works, it doesn't work, or maybe the dosage should be a little different. That's kind of same with steroids. It's always been like, well, you know, this protocol, this stack works. So this is what kind of commonplace in bodybuilding, what's commonplace in the gym world. So it's that's why I say, like, the science of the bro science of bodybuilding is its own little, like, kind of voodoo science in its own way.
Very much so. Very much so. Now, let's zero in on that if I knew 15 years ago what I knew now aspect. So let's say we've got young guy, maybe middle-aged guy, let's say anywhere 20s, 30s, 40s, and they still want to push it. They feel good enough that they want to push the limits a little bit. They want to gain some serious muscle. They want to be shredded. Maybe it's to compete, maybe it's just to be the ultimate gym bro. Who knows? But they're pushing the limits like we know people tend to push the limits. With your current knowledge and the availability of other ancillaries, peptides, whatever it might be out there, and the ease at which to get these things or to get some testing done, what would you recommend to somebody that does want to push the limits to obtain a gnarly physique? What do they pay attention to? What do they run concurrently? What do they have at their disposal that maybe you wish you had coming up?
I think it's number one's knowing again, what we just said, consequence to what you're going to do. Knowing, like, if something gets extremely high, how do you combat that, or how do you counteract some of the issues that will arise from doing, say, extremely high dose of testosterone. I think the first thing people need to understand is you don't need to do as much as you think you need to do to get results, because there's a point where it's your body just can't process it as well anymore, and then it's just kind of like a point of diminishing returns. Like, doing 500 versus 1,000 milligrams of testosterone is likely going to yield almost no difference in gains a long term. But you're putting more stress and damage on the body by doing that. Just say 1,000 grams of, or 1,000 milligrams of testosterone versus 500. Now, 500 is a super high dose as well. I see, and that's the one thing I usually help people with to understand. HRT, which has gotten obviously bastardized in the internet world, is not the dose they typically run at with 200 milligrams. That's a super physiological dose, because your testosterone level at 200 is probably going to be in, like, between 1,500 and 2,200, and that's a very, very high level. Guys can beat the test. Obviously, you don't take a shot for a week and a half, and you're just going to have a suppressed level. So, hey, my test is only 400, so I'm going to keep the 200 level going. Like, really, HRT is like 80 to 100 milligrams a week for most guys to put you in that sweet spot of 1,000 and 1,200. And at that level, that's a really good, healthy level to kind of get great results in the gym. Again, if you're talking goals, if your goal is to be fit, look good, feel good, like live a long, healthy life as a guy, like, you have to look at, okay, that level is probably a sweet spot for most guys. Um, if you're planning to compete at a super high level in bodybuilding, okay, things have to be pushed a little harder. But that's where I really question guys and ask, like, what's your ultimate, like, vision of your life? Like, start looking, think a little bit longer term than, like, I just want to win Instagram. Like, that, what kind of goal is that? Like, just because you want to get some more likes on your photos, or maybe, try to get some girls, which they're probably not going to like your photos. It's probably just gonna be more guys liking your photos. At the end of the day, let's be real. Um, that's probably more a realistic, healthier spot to be, like, just based on testosterone, because everything kind of bases off that. No matter, you know that's kind of the bread and butter of majority when it comes to men's ability to gain muscle, lose weight, all that kind of stuff. Like let's base it on, let's just go on testosterone there. Um, the the add-on stuff, the keeping, like, knowing your sweet spot with testosterone. And I think, like I said, testing, availability of testing now, the cost being more available. A lot of conventional doctors don't even run testosterone and on general health checks. And I'm like, how are you not? Your PCP didn't run any testosterone or estrogen to see like where your hormone levels are at. Like, so understanding that balance with testosterone and estrogen, the importance of that, and even going deeper. If you're a natural guy, and even if you're not natural, looking at hormones like pregnenolone and DHEA, I never paid attention to those. Now I do, and now I understand the value of those and having those in optimal levels, because that'll help your body with mental clarity, with focus, with energy, with sexual function, all that kind of stuff. Because those are all the precursors to the other sex hormones that are taking a beating, or they're super physiological enhanced and all that kind of stuff. So baseline like testosterone, hormonal, estrogen, very important to kind of understand when it comes to the building blocks of the male body, and how your body reacts. Some guys can react, or some guys will aromatize estrogen or testosterone to estrogen very easy, and they have a lot of issues. The guys that are super bloated, that look like they just took their first cycle of Deca and D-ball, and they're puffed out of their mind, and they gained 40 pounds in their cycle, and like, I'm huge now. But
No, those were the days. Those were the days.
I've been there. Everybody's been there, and so it's really understanding that the higher dose stuff is not always necessary, and finding like less is more is what I really try to preach now to a lot of my guys. Again, you're talking goals. If your goal is to get on Olympia stage, okay, you might have to push the limits. I never really, I don't, I never went over a gram of test. I know that. I just felt like it was unnecessary, and I felt like I was going to have too many other like issues with. I got to hammer more Arimidex because my estrogen's through the roof, and I'm trying to manage that. And if I do that, it's going to absolutely wreak havoc on my HDL, my cholesterols. I always kind of knew that stuff, and I knew how crappy I felt having to take a bunch of AIs because I'm on super high doses. And it was when I started working with George Farah, he was the one that really shined a lot of light on, you don't need as much as you think you do. I remember when we started working together, it was like the first cycle we put together. It was pretty much like a elementary first time NPC competitor cycle, like 400 milligrams EQ, 500 tests. I was like, that's it. That's what we're going to start an Arnold prep with. Okay, I'm good with that. And I'm a guy that'll listen and trust what you're going to say. I was like, wow. I'm really responding well to this. And so that really taught me and showed me like, hey, it's not necessarily that you have to continually go up, 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 up. It's finding what works for you, but trying to say less is more with a lot of this stuff. Keeping an eye on liver enzymes, very, very important. Your liver is ultimately like your air filter for your body. I love using an analogy with like cars with my clients and patients that I see in my clinic. We talk about, hey, when you could understand, people understand cars. They understand if I put your food is like your fuel. When you put better fuel in your car, it's going to run better. You put better food in your body, it's going to run better. So with understanding, your liver is like your air filter, and it absolutely everything goes through that in order to create, whether it's hormones, whether it's to filter out the toxins, or whether it's process hormones, all that kind of stuff. It's knowing like if your liver's inflamed, if you're beating the crap out of it with orals, it's how do you keep those enzymes down? How do doing those tests that are very important. The metabolic tests are very important, because that's like the first line that say there's something wrong in your body if that's not efficient enough. That's you're beating the crap out of that. How do we manage that level? How do we help your give your liver some support with enzyme with stuff like glutathione support or NAC? Those are some of the ones I love to use now, because they work, and you're helping your body function more efficiently. And the word detox, a lot of people think it's like eat a bunch of bird seed and drink some Kool-Aid from a plant or something like that. Like it's always got like this woo woo kind of analogy, I think, but understanding like that's a very important phase in your body when it comes to your health is detoxification. Like everything we do, your body has to ultimately like detox it. The whether it's chemicals in foods, whether it's the water that may not be as pure as we think, or whether it's the excess stuff we're taking with orals or PEDs. Even everything's got to pass through the liver, and it has to. Your liver is really what figures out, hey, am I going to use this or am I going to get rid of it? So those are some of the big markers I look at now. I would say I make sure to keep an eye on, because those are going to be factors in how your body will ultimately process things and respond when it comes to adding in, or adding more compounds in, or try to do more supplements. If those aren't in the right areas, you're just fighting an uphill battle.
And I think touching on the enhancement of how your body will respond to the other things you're doing is something that really can be beneficial to point out a lot, because especially in the younger crowd, health isn't that sexy. It's hard to sell somebody that's already on the surface level very healthy on, taking care of their liver, taking care of their heart, taking care of their kidneys. But in a lot of these cases, like with the liver specifically, like you said, if that's operating at full function, you're metabolizing the supplements and drugs that you're taking better, and you're getting more bang for your buck out of them. And it's making all the difference in things like your glucagon production and release of blood sugar and subsequent ability to get lean and everything like that. We all want to talk about GLPs these days, and a lot of stuff is stemming in from the liver, pancreas, the health of all these internal organs. So let's talk about liver specifically a little bit more. What are you looking for? Are you looking at like AST, ALT? Are you looking at GGT? And you mentioned NAC and glutathione. What are some protocols that you like to implement to make sure that liver is healthy in general? And then what do you do if there's a problem?
So the main markers, obviously, AST, ALT are the ones we're going to look at right away. And those can be affected. Mine are typically, so I'll preface it this way. If you're going to do labs, give yourself 2-3 days off from the gym. Do your normal lifestyle with nutrition and everything. Don't go out drinking, acting a fool. Like, that way you can get a true baseline of what your liver enzymes are. Anytime I do my blood work and I either train the day before really hard or even that morning of or something like that, my liver enzymes are elevated from muscle breakdown and protein breakdown from the training. It does that causes inflammation in the body, and the liver has to work at kind of getting rid of some of the byproduct of the hard workout. So that could skew some of the numbers. But if you're, like I said, give it a few days, that way you can kind of get a good baseline of those numbers. And then from there, if they're elevated, and I think even the ranges that it typically gets on, say, a LabCorp test. LabCorp's one of the labs we use for majority of our labs. For people that get blood draws in person, we can do at-home labs too, which is really cool. But from there, if they're showing elevation, then we say, okay, first line of defense, there's other things we can look at. Is this an oxidative issue? Is this an inflammation issue? Is this a detoxification issue? We kind of figure out what pathway may it be or what's going on in the body, because we've got to look at it as a whole. But that's why I do love NAC, and you just using NAC year round, because it's kind of like being a natty bodybuilder and taking something that's going to help boost your testosterone naturally every day. You're like, man, I want to be optimal. I just want to take a little extra, say DAA, because it's going to help boost up my natural test. And sure, and you could take that daily, and it's not going to hurt you. It's going to help probably boost your natural test up, and you just feel better. NAC is one of those products that will help boost your natural glutathione in your body, which ultimately you may suffer or may not be optimal if your body's not detoxing properly. So adding in anywhere from 600 to 1200 milligrams of NAC daily is just a great kind of daily supplement regimen add-in that I love to do on a daily basis. It's in some of the products I take, and it does help just keep the body clean and flowing good. And I always just feel much like I don't put it this way, by doing that and keeping my liver healthy, I know that I have really rid myself of seasonal allergies. Now I don't have, I mean, yeah, occasionally I may come across something hit me where I got to sneeze a little bit, but I don't take allergy medication anymore because I've really detoxed my liver enough that it is functioning and filtering properly. That's the important. That just shows you like one of the things that you can do by balancing your body out and keeping it healthy. The glutathione's one that if somebody's really inflamed or have really high enzymes, we're going to look at, is this a lifestyle issue? Like, are you drinking alcohol on top of working out, taking a bunch of oral drugs and partying too much and doing things like that? Yeah, you're going to have super high enzymes. So we may add in some glutathione in there. because that is a great detoxer when it comes to helping the liver out. And there's other things like we've talked about, the citrusberg and the TUDCA, and those kind of things do help out. But I think those are a little bit more popular in the bodybuilding world. But I think in the basic functional stuff that actually works, NAC and glutathione are some powerhouses for the liver.
Awesome. I agree 1,000% on that one. Now, you mentioned estrogen before. So, where is, in your opinion, keeping in mind that everybody's different, but where's the generalized optimum level for estrogen in a man? And what are some of the dangers of overdoing AIs?
That's one that I always tell people, having it too low is just as bad as having it too high, as far as you're going to have issues either way. So it's finding the sweet spot that works for you. Guys that have too low of estrogen, and it can be from taking too many AIs, you have to be, I mean, and a lot of doctors will automatically prescribe, say, Arimidex if they put somebody on TRT. I see this all the time. And then somebody's taking like 1 to 2 milligrams of Arimidex a week on TRT, and I'm like, let's just run your labs and let's see what your estrogen is. And sure enough, it's just tanked. It's either single digit or it's sub 20, and they feel like crap. They're like, don't know why that this TRT isn't working for them. Well, it's because your estrogen's in the tank. And that's a very common one that I see with a lot of guys. And you'd be surprised, like Arimidex is extremely strong. Like you probably only need about 1/4 of a milligram to get the results that you're looking for out of Arimidex for estrogen suppression or keeping it at a manageable level for guys that are on, say, enhancement with HRT, TRT, or even doing if you're in the 300 to 500 milligram range, you might have to go a little higher. You might have to go a 0.5 milligram or even potentially 1, but 1 even pushing it. And if you do too much of that, like you said, what are side effects of that? You're going to have issues. Again, sexual dysfunction's one, obviously, that I see a lot of guys because sex drive goes in the tank, or sexual dysfunction because estrogen's super low. And the other one is the cardiac and lipid profiles just get destroyed. Arimidex is notorious for killing the HDL of somebody. And when you look at their labs, for years, because I was taking plenty of Arimidex or AIs, my HDL was in the teens, and that's terrible. Like you want to have it over 40 is the number we look at to say, okay, you're doing pretty good. I want to see it 50, 60, 70 is starting to get really optimal there. What are things you can do? You could bump your omega-3s up. That's very important. Niacin's a great one for that. There's things you can start incorporating to help improve those profiles, and it's important. Like don't overlook the HDL and those ratios that are, having a little bit high cholesterol. I'm not mad at. If it's 200 is the number we see on a lot of labs, but if it's 220, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, this is terrible. Triglycerides is one we want to get get that pretty low. That's one we want to get down. But the HDL is one that I know in the bodybuilding world, it suffers a ton because of the estrogen. Everybody kind of demonizing estrogen. It is a necessary hormone in the male body as well. It's important to have that within good ranges and finding the good range that works. I love incorporating a lot of natural products when it comes to estrogen management for guys, like incorporating DIM and CDG into their protocols and understanding there's a sweet spot with that too, because that too much, again, could wreak havoc on your system. So again, working with somebody that understands this and is knowledgeable, not just hearing it on a podcast and saying, yeah, they told me I need to take DIM and you're hammering 5 DIM pills a day. And then everything else, it acts like an anti-androgen where all of a sudden, like everything you're taking, you just feel like you're on finasteride, where it feels like you're crying, you're all jacked up. Like, again, guys, we're talking moderation here and understanding what your numbers are and balancing them out and using some more natural components versus trying to, always go pharmacological with everything.
And keeping in mind that, yes, you can overdo the natural stuff too. Supplements are sometimes just as effective, if not more effective than certain drugs. But that said, I love that you just brought up DIM and calcium D-gluconate, because those two products for estrogen management are so overlooked because they're so effective. But again, they can be too effective. Don't take a half a bottle a day just because it's natural and you think natural can't hurt you. You mentioned Hematocrit earlier, and that's something where almost every time I get initial blood work from a new client or a consult call that has a background in bodybuilding or HRT, we're constantly seeing elevated hematocrit. And I know to an extent being elevated above the normal baseline is just something that comes with, the game of being an athlete in general or training really hard. But What do you like to do to mitigate that when that becomes an issue? Is that something where you just address the source, or how do you actually deal with it when it's there? Like, how do you deal with high hematocrit levels?
Source is a good way. I mean, if you're looking at somebody that's taking HRT, I mean, there's a lot of times guys come to me that are on HRT from the doc. You're not just a gym bro. They're like, hey, my doc's got me on 200 milligrams of test, but my hematocrit's through the roof and I fight with this issue all the time. Well, then maybe we should look at maybe backing it down a little bit. Try 150 or go down to 100 to see how you feel. And sometimes you could, because our body's always naturally producing and getting rid of red blood cells, just because it's like, ultimately what's happening is making them faster and your body can get rid of them. So that's why there's more or less a surplus of them when you're enhanced. But training hard and doing those things, yes, they do increase red blood cell production. But if it's really extreme, we got to look at dumping blood. Absolutely, I'm not always a proponent to just jump to that right away. But if it's kind of in that red zone, we're like, man, we're pushing it. And you should know if it's too high, like some of the symptoms you'll feel, and I've felt this before, like you're going to feel sluggish. You're going to feel kind of hard. It's more of a difficulty breathing sometimes. Like you're doing cardio and you're like, I just can't catch my breath. Like what this, and I'm in good shape. Like, why do I feel like this? And then sometimes I'm like, man, it's probably my H&H starting to climb up a little bit too high and my blood's getting a little too thick and it's not as efficient as it should be transporting oxygen and doing the things it needs to do to help my body really function optimally. So if you're kind of experiencing that, if you're just walking on a treadmill and you're out of breath, but you know that you're in decent shape and you shouldn't be that, like it might be time to get your hematocrit checked. That's where I would usually send somebody down to a blood donation spot and they could, donate blood, or they even offer the whole blood or double red. If you're super high, double red is necessary to really get rid of a lot of volume fast.
And I think monitoring blood work, like you were saying before, is something that goes hand in hand with that, because I've worked a lot in the HRT space. I've helped 3 clinics open at this point in time and consult with a few other ones, just more on a nutrition end of it. But I do see a lot of what they're seeing and dealing with. And in a lot of cases, I'm seeing places overprescribing therapeutic phlebotomies. And what you have is people going in and dumping blood now every 6 to 8 weeks on the regular. And while their hematocrit is now under control, if you look a little bit deeper, you see that their iron and their ferritin's completely tanked. And now it becomes like, well, why am I tired all the time? Well, it's because you're basically anemic. So that's a whole other issue. And that takes forever to build back up. So I think what you're saying about like addressing it from the source, maybe adjusting the meds a little bit, dumping blood when necessary, as opposed to just preventatively. These are all things that come together. Now, getting into this realm of just cardiac health and whatnot, you did mention omegas before, fish oil. How important is omega-3 supplementation to the big picture in all of this?
I never realized that's one of the things that I feel like if I put more emphasis on earlier, how important it was. And it's one of those I just knew, check the box, like take 2 to 3 grams of fish oil a day, and I'm going to be like checking that box off in my early days. But now understanding that really the omega-3 level that you have to look at in your body is so important. That's really, we run a test, the omega-3 index, and it's a very simple test, at home test. I love to run for guys that it's more or less like an inflammation test to your body. It's going to give your omega-3 to 6 ratio. And that ratio is very important. It gives like your total omega-3, but that ratio is 6 to 3. When you hear a lot of people talking about seed oil, you hear a lot of people talking about carnivore diet, that it's heavy omega-6. Is that what, if you're eating a lot of processed foods that has like, soybean oil or canola oil and all these kind of things like chips and different snacks, because highly processed or preserved foods, there's a lot of omega-6 in them. And what happens is that 6 to 3 ratio gets thrown way off. And you want that typically in like a 3 to 4 to 1 ratio. And I think most Americans are in anywhere from 15 to 18 to 1. And that's going to create a lot of inflammation in the body. So the natural combating inflammation, instead of saying, oh, I'm inflamed, I need to go take some Tylenol or Motrin or hammer some Celebrex or do some stuff like that. Like a natural great way to reduce inflammation in your body is increasing the omega-3s in your diet or supplementation. Diet wise, there's great ways to get that, whether it's, I don't like to go with some of the fish that are a little bit more on the heavier metals, so not to go too heavy on tunas and all that kind of stuff. But salmon is great. I love sardines. I actually incorporate a lot of sardines into my diet now just because it's heavy omega-3. It's a great natural source. And so I tell a lot of my clients, I'm like, you may not like it, but honestly, like it's one of the healthiest things you can do to improve inflammation, improve your omega-3 index, your total omega-3 in your body. And like that's just super important. When I hear people always like, I feel like I have so much inflammation, we start bumping their omega-3s. And omega-3 supplementation is important to get the right omega-3s, guys. Like there's a ton of companies that sell omega-3s and fish oils. Yes, but there's a 90% of it out there is garbage. A lot of it is not stored properly, where it's rancid, and it really degrades the quality of it. You want to make sure that there's a good ratio of EPA to DHA. EPA is a little bit more like total body, DHA a little bit more brain focused. And with that, like you want like a 2-to-1 EPA to DHA for to try to get on that. And then you want like the total omegas, you want 2 to 3 good quality grams of actually omega-3, not just total like omegas, because sometimes they get a little bit vague on that, and they're like, oh yeah, it's 3 grams of fish oil. Like, well, there's only like 100 milligrams of EPA in there, when it should probably be like 1,500 milligrams of EPA.
Exactly.
In there. So
I get that all the time, constantly. It's like, oh, I'm taking 3,000 milligrams of fish oil. It's like, but how much omega-3? It's like,
correct. So kind of a rule of thumb is, if you don't buy your supplements where you buy your toilet paper. And Amazon's not always the best place, because it may be not stored in the proper temperatures and that kind of stuff. So there's like we're not kind of married to any one company when we prescribe different supplements to people. So we, again, based on what their needs are, we'll give them. There's a lot of great brands out there that we work with that have really great products too.
1,000%. And just to touch on the sardines a little bit too, because you will always get people that are just like, nah, fuck that. But sardines are, they might not be the best tasting on the planet. It's kind of an acquired taste, but to what you said, they're not that bad. They're easy to eat. You buy a can with a pop top on it, $2.50, $3.50 for a good brand, 30 grams of protein, 25 grams of protein. Like, I have about 50 of them in my cabinet. I'll eat a can a day. My dogs all eat them. Like, my whole house smells like sardines. My wife hates it, but it's one of those things where it's like, I'll eat a bunch of them. The dogs get them for dinner like every other day at least, because it's literally a superfood. But omega-3s is the reason why. There's nothing special about sardines outside of omega-3s. So I'm just going to double and triple down.
I'm a big proponent of it. I really started incorporating that. For people who are like, where do I get them? Yeah, you want to get good quality, like wild caught in olive oil, like that. Those are what you look for in those, because I'm sure people are going to be like asking about sardines after seeing this. They actually have a really good brand at Costco. A lot of Costco fans, I'm sure, on this podcast, and now Costco is going to get sold out because we're talking about it. But they have like a 6-pack that, again, you take it for one of your meals, a lunch meal. I usually, just to kind of share how I'll eat it, not straight out of the can, not that super hardcore, but I'll get rice, the sardines. I'll put in some, because they're in olive oil, and then I'll get balsamic vinegar, maybe mix in a green with it. And man, it's not that bad. It's actually, I enjoy that meal. So yeah, that's how I like to do it.
Hey, we've all eaten tuna out of the can before, and it's leaps and bounds above that. Now, before we finish beating the concept of sardines into the ground, do you got Sprouts near you? Sprouts Supermarket?
We do, yeah. In Dallas, where I'm at, there's everything's over here.
So check them out, because I've noticed that every couple months, either Wild Planet or the knockoff Wild Planet, they'll knock those sardines down to $1 a can. So I'll literally leave with like 40 of them. So I'm that guy buying 40 cans of, and then asking, hey, do you have any more in the back? And
I'll take them.
So you look like a weirdo, but whatever. We've all done it before. Nonetheless, moving on. In the space that you're in currently, the wellness space, and as a high-performing athlete in your own right, let's talk peptides a little bit.
Sure.
What are some of these peptides that are your personal favorites, and what are you seeing giving the biggest return to all the patients that come through your clinic?
There's just more and more peptides that drop every single day. It's crazy. I mean, there's probably thousands out there now, and they're finding every little pathway and every little thing that this can do, whether it's for brain health or sleep or circadian rhythm and joint health and inflammation, all that. And I think they're blanketing some a little bit too like, kind of giving them too much props. Like, oh, this is going to help you lose fat, gain muscle, sleep better, have better. Like that sounds like the miracle drug. Like, how come everybody's not experiencing this? But I think ultimately, like, peptides are great. They're a great natural-ish way to kind of help enhance results that you're looking for or trying to get healthier. I think some of the peptides are going to save people's lives. GLP products are going to save a lot of heavily obese people's lives. That either, they're okay, they're taking the cholesterol medication, the diabetic medication, all the things like that, but they just are still not losing weight. And all of a sudden they jump on a GLP product and they drop 50 pounds, and all of a sudden they don't need the high blood pressure medication and cholesterol medication, and their diabetes is under control. And they're like, oh my God, like that's amazing. That's necessary. Now, can you abuse a good thing? Absolutely. Like you see a lot of people probably taking it that don't need to take it, but it's fatty, it's trendy, they think it's going to help them or something like that. So again, you got to be careful with these things. Can they hurt you? Potentially, yes, but you have to be smart with everything. When it comes to peptides, a lot of this is newer. Some of them been around a long time, like GLP-1s have been around since the 90s. It's not a new thing, but now that they've realized the off-label use, they're able to kind of really start incorporating for other things. Like that's when I saw your video with Nick when he was talking about taking retatrutide for his prep.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about it, like that probably would have helped me, I'm sure, during some preps, kill the appetite. Like when you're just craving things, you're super malnourished in ways, you're starving, you're like, man, I'm 2 weeks out and I wish I had something that blunted my appetite. Like, we had to go ahead and hammer yohimbine and clen and all that kind of stuff to kill the appetite. You hammer enough of that, man, you didn't want to look at anything. But some of the peptides I feel that are kind of the ones that are popular and I believe that work the best. If you're somebody that's taking growth hormone, like you don't need to take the growth hormone releasing peptides as well. Like you take growth hormone by itself, it's going to cover your whole basis for all the growth hormone style peptides. So you can get that out of the way, because there's guys who are like, well, I'm taking Smorelin, but I'm also taking somatropin and or genotropin as well. And I'm like, you don't need to. You pick one of them that you want to do. You don't need to do like your CJC and ipamorelin if you're taking real growth hormone here as well. So
don't take Tribulus with your testosterone.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of unnecessary on that. But I think some of the best ones are some of like the Wolverine stack you hear commonly, the BPC 157, TB 500, and now they're combining it with the GHKCU. And I was doing that kind of before they added in like this more designer where they're adding in the copper peptide, and they're seeing, you're seeing amazing things. Like kind of a little nickname we say, it's kind of like Botox in a bottle. If you It helps with wrinkles, helps with skin health, helps with some inflammation, helps with joint health, helps with recovery from injuries a little bit faster. Those kind of things are very beneficial for people, especially as we age. Our healing decreases, like the rate at which we heal is decreased. So utilizing these peptides to help you, if you're training really hard for a competition, if you're kind of getting over a surgery, an injury, something like that, the recovery peptides, the BPC, TB500 work amazing at helping accelerate the healing. Do you want to take it year round? No, you want to cycle it as needed, because one, you're going to lose the effectiveness of it, and you just don't need. There's some potential long-term effects that aren't really understood yet. The one that they say could affect some tumor growth-ish things. So we're just going to keep an eye on that. So that's why, hey, be smart about it. If you're going through some heavy training, getting over an injury, have some tendonitis going, flaring up, like give it a shot, and you're going to have a lot of success. And it doesn't need to be huge, crazy doses. If you do 500 micrograms a day, 5 days a week, that's usually sufficient to get great results. If you really got something that's pissed off, then I would say maybe every day, and you can maybe bump it up a little bit more. But anything more, it's kind of unnecessary, because you're going to get results with the dose that I've pretty much used myself. The copper product, like I said, with that either by itself I love the copper product for more like skin beauty, but also works for cellular health too. It's kind of the nickname we call it, like, again, kind of like Botox in a bottle, like, again, helping the skin out. And a lot of women notice the less fine wrinkles, all that kind of stuff. Some of the GLPs I'm a big fan of, more the GLP-3, the newer stuff. GLP-1, not so much. A lot of side effects people have. GLP-2, tirzepatide, a lot of people like it because they really haven't tried GLP-3, but they don't like 1. So 2's been their next best choice. And then I'm like, let's try 3 out. And, the FDA is really cracking down, and it's more big pharma probably leaning on them saying, hey, we want a protection of the GLPs. We want to make sure we're making our money with this. So all these other companies that are selling these, the companies advertising selling semaglutide or tirzepatide or retatrutide, they're getting. Rick Collins just made a big post that the state of Ohio's anybody that's selling retatrutide in um, whether it's a clinic or anything like that, can either be fined or it will be taken from them because they're deeming it illegal to sell as retatrutide. Now, there's loopholes to it. The loopholes of calling it GLP-3, calling it, changing, adding another ingredient, maybe like they throw B12 in it, or changing the dosage of what they are creating in the bottle. Instead of the 2 milligrams a bottle, they're putting 3 milligrams, and all of a sudden, okay, it's not the same when the pharmacies are the pharmaceutical companies are doing. It's what it's not. We don't care at that point. They turn their head. But retatrutide is a great product. I think it's one of the best out there when it comes to weight loss, when it comes to controlling appetite and blood sugar, and kind of more the original reasons why people were taking GLPs. Uh, Another one off label that I see a lot of people utilizing for, and I have some clients that have had issues, say, with alcohol, and they're like, man, I drink a little bit too much, and they're wondering, like, what can I do to help my drinking? Let's try a low dose of retatrutide. It wouldn't hurt. You could drop a couple pounds, not going to hurt, and then boom, all of a sudden that like craving for, that's why it kills people's appetite, because they're not craving that sugar, but craving for like alcohol and even sometimes smoking. That's common. They're noticing, I mean, we're not talking 4 or 5 milligrams here. We're talking half to 1 milligram, just a little bit, just to kind of curb that little dopamine hit that they want, that they're craving. That's huge for people.
Like I'll speak to that one too, because I was a habitual, like, daily, or try to say nightly, THC user for about 10 years. And I'm not saying I'm anti-THC. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. I think it's heavily abused, but I don't think it's killing anybody. But 10 years straight, like, I hadn't gone to bed at night without some sort of THC in my system for a decade. Like, literally, I used to work for WWE. I got released from the company when I was out of my contract. I wasn't getting drug tested. First thing I did is I ran out and I got I got a bottle of Test and I got a bag of weed. But then I got my prescriptions for both. I did it for 10 years. 6 weeks into my first retatrutide course, my medical card was up for renewal. And I was like, I don't feel like going to the appointment. I'm just going to let it lapse. I'll get it back later. That was in December. Like, I just let it lapse. I don't care about it anymore. I don't need it anymore. I sleep fine without it. Like, retatrutide literally had me just one day go, and then just stop 10 years of marijuana cold turkey. So I will speak as a testament to that until the day I die. It would be cooler if it helped me stop something that was a little bit more detrimental to my health than marijuana, but that's all I got. I don't have a lot of vices, so I guess I'll pat myself on the back for that. What are some of the other peptides that you've seen be promising that might be a little bit newer? Like, have you seen anything with these mitochondrial peptides, or are you seeing anything that's new that might be emerging that has some promise to it? Like, what's on the horizon?
Some of the oral ones I've seen people have a lot of success with. I've tried like MK677. That at the right dose almost feels like 4 to 5 IUs of growth. Like, I feel like, man, my appetite's way up. I'm sleeping really good, and I put on 4 or 5 pounds of fullness just from taking that. So a lot of guys that are like, man, I don't want to take steroids. I'm kind of want to try these peptides out, but I want to gain some muscle, and I'm not really a fan of shots. I'm like, oh, let's try MK677. It's an oral pill. Take it either the morning and night, and boom, like feel great, and a lot of people have great success with that. That one is great. Some of the fat loss ones, like 5-amino or tesofensine, I'm seeing a lot of people love those. It's kind of a love-hate with tesofensine. Some people love it. Some people are like, it keeps me up at night, and my sleep's kind of screwed up, and I can only attribute that because that's the only thing I've added in. So we cut it out. But for the most part, a lot of people get a lot of great success with tesofensine. They're seeing more focus, more energy, a little bit more fat loss. So like there's, adding in like teso and retatrutide together is a great fat loss stack. Some of the mitochondrial ones, it's funny because you have some of these companies that don't understand that if you combine certain, say, mitochondrial ones that make, say, your mitochondria more efficient, and then one that makes it less efficient, combining them just kind of cancel each other out. So I see a lot of companies doing that, like buying AOD and SS31 and all that, and where they're like, you're understanding, you're kind of trying to play yin and yang here, and it's pulling two opposite directions with some of these concoctions you're doing. So again, understand how the mechanisms work. Just because it says fat loss, you have to know like why it's creating a fat loss environment in your body, or why you're going to be burning more calories versus just taking it because it says it's for fat loss. So,
Right. You got to understand how it's working to take advantage of the synergy, and not just, like you said, two opposite pathways colliding into each other and just doing God knows what in your system.
Correct. Some of the one I'm actually getting ready to try is epithalon, more to kind of reset the circadian rhythm. They're what the studies and what people are saying is it potentially can help with increasing telomere length, and telomere length's one that's often associated with aging of our bodies. It's actually a lot of the DNA tests that we can do to check your biological versus chronological age. Your biological age, more they're looking at telomere length. And I actually had mine done. I tested mine, and I'm actually aging now. Again, everything that I did last 20 years, let's take that into consideration. I'm aging at a slower rate than my actual age, which is really cool. So I'm aging at about 0.95 per year of what somebody average healthy, because I mean they're taking it as an average of all the tests they get, and they're saying these are pretty health conscious people. Like I'm sure if you look at the whole world and they did this test, like that number would probably be even better, but the people that are trying like the true longevity or like the anti-agers or live forever kind of people, they're doing these tests, checking their telomere lengths. And then they're saying, hey, I'm aging at 0.6. I think right now, like the instructor that taught all my courses, Dr. Cabral, like I think he's at like 0.65 is what his aging is per year. Like it's crazy. And he incorporates all the protocols that, we do in our, the way he's doing his training, the way, and that's, I mean, we can get a whole conversation about that, but it's just amazing at like what we've been known in bodybuilding more and more and more, like sometimes a little bit less is more, not needing to train 6 days a week, but more like 3 days a week, not having to eat as much protein as we usually do, taking that down to maybe, 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that's even a little high on that longevity marker kind of style. But so there's a lot of different things, yes, on the peptide wise that can help with a lot of, but again, you have to know your goals and understand why you're doing certain things, not just doing them because you saw one reel that said this works for fat loss.
That's the problem. Too many people are getting all their knowledge from reels. So that's something else. And we could spend a whole hour just dissecting that. But I think you really like the epithalon. I've done 2 courses of it now, and you don't really notice a ton from it. But what I've found that in the weeks after usage, you just fall asleep better. You wake up without your alarm. Like you said, resets the circadian rhythm, does a lot in that regard. So I've really enjoyed that one. I definitely think you will too. So one more question for you in this world. So having all of your life experiences, having competed at the highest level, being now in this industry where you're helping men and women live better, longer, healthier lives, what's in Steve Kuclo's secret stash for when you just want to push it at the gym? You want to just say, hey, I'm going to spend the next 6 to 8 weeks just going all out. I want to stay healthy. I've got my family. I've got my businesses, but I'm going to crank things up a notch. What's the first thing you deploy?
First thing I deploy. So I found a pretty sweet spot with my test. Like I'm not like, I'm going to slam test. I take about 0.75 mLs a week, which is about 160-ish milligrams a week. And that puts me at about 1,200 of my test level. So I know I'm good there. Again, because I'm testing it. I know like that's a sweet spot. All the other hormones, estrogen, everything is great. But if I'm like, hey, I want to, I'm going to the beach in 2 weeks. I actually got my 40th birthday coming up in about 2.5 weeks from the time we're filming this. So I'm like, what can I do? First thing I think one of the best things for me personally that I've experienced is I had a little Anavar. If you'd ever tried Anavar, it's a great supplement to add in. And, again, bodybuilders are like, I do 50 to 100 milligrams. You don't need to do that much to get a lot of, 20 to 40 is probably more of a sweet spot for most males. And, I've had a lot of my clients that have wanted to get on some of that and have had amazing results. It's one of those things like you look and feel a little bit better, stronger, you're a little harder, leaner. And then when you come off it, you're like, man, I looked really good. And then when I was on it compared to when I'm off it. So it's one of those, like, you definitely notice it when you're off versus on, but I do notice my body transform really. I mean, like I notice I'm leaner, I'm harder. the increase in DHT in my body. It's obviously filling my body out. I'm getting rounder. All the things. The strength is increasing. So it hits a lot of the checkpoints. And at this point in my life, I'm like, if I want to just kind of turn it up a little bit, that's probably the extent of what I'll do. Because I'm like, at this point, I'm not having to get on stage. I'm not having to compete against anybody. Do I want to, maybe for a little vanity, look a little better, a little leaner, a little more vascular? Sure, we'll do that. But it's not by any means to like, hey, I'm gonna do a full cycle of Tren and Masteron and Primo and stack it with some Winnie, and like, no, we're not gonna be doing that anymore.
So let me reiterate that to especially all the younger guys listening and the guys that kind of just want to maybe get back in the groove of things a little bit, without just rehashing all of your accolades that I already rehashed. Because if I do it again, people are just going to be like, you were kissing his ass the whole time.
Yeah.
But let's keep in mind, those are some pretty damn high accolades. Somebody that has been there and done that now with the ability to optimize everything else in his life, if he wants to dial it in, it's a little bit of high quality Anavar deployed at the right time in the right dosages. And you can take that and you can run miles with it. Steve, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome because I think this is going to open a lot of people's minds up to the fact that they can have this world of performance enhancement and this world of health and longevity together at the same time, especially the guys and girls competing out there, but really for everybody. If people want to dive more into this, where can they find your content? Where can they find information about your company, information about how to become a person affiliated with your company, getting blood work done, becoming a patient? Like,
Sure.
How do people find you?
Well, I just want to finish like telling everybody, like, if you're going to do things right, be smart about it, work with somebody that you trust or that's knowledgeable in those areas. You yourself, Drew, you've spent years and years and years and years doing this. You didn't just do it once and all of a sudden you're an expert. I think a lot of this, I think the 10,000 hour applies to health and wellness. If you've been in the space a lot, I mean, that takes at least 5 years of grinding every day for, 10 hours to hit that in 5 years. 10,000 hours usually takes 7 years for most people to hit. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we've been in the space, like you said, for over 20 years, getting, understanding, seeing results, having the clinical experience with things. But do things right, do things smart, take breaks. If you're gassed up all the time, like eventually you're going to burn the car out. You're going to burn the engine out. You need to take breaks. And that's how I was able to do it for as long as I did. I made a point, like toward the end of the last 7 years of my career, like when it was time to compete, we would get on the gas, we would push hard. When it would come off after the show, we would just clean everything out. Let's get my body healthy. That's why I always gained 20 pounds before a show. Like people are like, how do you go from 270 to 290? I started prep at 270. I'd get on stage at close to 290. Because I would do, and then they'd be like, oh, I see now. This guy was probably just cruising and just allowing his body to be a lot healthier and normal. And then when he pre-contest, I Kevin LeBron'd it because I was doing things smart, give my body a chance to heal up, recover. So I'll say that to kind of finish. But as far as me, they can always find me at Steve Kuclo on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on TikTok a little bit. I got to get on all the more social channels. I've just really been grinding in my work so much that I just hired a kind of operations assistant where she's helping me really kind of get more active on some of my socials again and all that. Just social media can be so consuming, and I just want to make sure I have a lot of clients, a lot of patients that I got to attend to. So I'm very attentive when it comes to that. So, but my company's Upgraded Human Wellness. I thought of how could everybody needs an upgrade to me. And with that, we've really kind of merged natural and supernatural and understanding like, the two worlds. And, we have functional testing from, hormonal blood work all the way to genetic testing and food sensitivity and gut health and everything like that. So, we work with men and women. My partner's amazing with female health, and, we do some amazing things. I think you might even enjoy having him on here too, Dr. Timmy. He's an amazing human, and
hell yeah,
we got some really cool stuff we're working on. It's the cutting edge. It's the new generation of medicine when it comes to. I had Dr. Attia talked about medicine 2.0 versus 3.0. 2.0 is like what we're in right now, and 3.0 is like what we're doing when it comes to addressing how to get people healthier, how to get people not having to take medications, but addressing root cause issues and helping them get healthy. Instead of just take a pill for a headache, we're going to realize like, why are you getting headaches? And let's address that. So that's what we're doing, and we love helping people, love changing the world, and getting people healthier instead of just keeping them taking pills and staying sick.
Amazing. And that's the right way to go about it. 1000%. Nobody can argue with that. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the DDT Method Podcast. Make sure to check out all of Steve's social media as well as Upgraded Human Wellness, and we will talk to you guys next time.